Okay, this presentation is now being officially recorded. All right, first we'd like to thank also our referees, Panina and Mrs. Freed, who really spend a lot of time going through some of the articles in this paper, in this journal. So we're going to start the proceedings for today. So first I'd like to introduce Dr. Anne Marie Scheidt, who's going to speak on behalf of Stony Brook.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello there. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Miriam and Jess. It's a privilege to be participating in the opening of this event because it celebrates the fundamental values of research and scholarship, the disinterested pursuit of truth wherever it may lead. It's a special privilege that this occasion honors Brooke Ellison, the founding mentor of the Journal of Ethics and Scientific and Technological Innovation, and her mother, Jean. How do you do, Jean? They constitute.
Thank you. I'm my husband, Ed.
How do you do, Ed?
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you all.
To meet you. But I have to say that it was Brooke and her mother that constituted the real life dynamic duo. As a pair, you were not superhuman, but supremely human in your joint triumph over the ills that flesh is heir to, and your inspiring demonstration that those ills don't create a separation from our single human family, but are part of the main, as the poet John Donne put it 4 centuries ago. Brooke continued, we can't say completed, the ongoing acknowledgement of the importance of ethics and science for the human family. The disavowal of the eugenics movement that had dominated thinking about how to make the world better at the beginning of the 20th century. The termination in 1972, a living memory for some of us here on the screen, of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. The rejection of the values that had justified the approval of the Milgram experiment at Yale and the Stanford prison experiment. I wish I could tell you all, you Garcia Program alumni, that you'll be picking up right where Brooke left off to continue her ethical journey. Instead, as you have probably seen in the press, we are living in a world where the new U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, less than a week after his confirmation, is reported to have told his staff that in order to account for the rising rates of chronic disease in our country, after decades of underinvestment in public health, he will be scrutinizing the CDC's recommended childhood vaccination schedules. Vaccination, what a surprise. Along with electromagnetic radiation, pesticides, ultra-processed foods, and the SSRIs that treat depression and anxiety as potential causes for those rising rates of chronic disease. You, whose very impressive work is represented in the 3rd edition of the journal, are clearly following Brooke's intellectual example. As you go forward as scientists, as scholars, and as citizens, it's clear you'll also need every bit of her inspiration and her courage and her empathy to sustain the quest for truth and its publication, to serve the needs of all of our fellow human beings. Thank you, and I'm so looking forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you very much, Anne Marie.
Thank you, Anne. That was lovely.
Thank you.
And since you've mentioned Brooke, we'll make a slight twist here in the schedule and have Debbie Mann, who is you were a classmate together.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Debbie Mann Rodriguez. I'm currently the Director of Research and Grants in the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk a little bit about my friend Brooke. So without further ado, good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. So Brooke and I, we go way back, all the way back to grad school here at Stony Brook. And I have such vivid memories of seeing Brooke in class with her wonderful mother, Jean, by her side. And it was truly heartwarming to witness Jean's incredible support and Brooke's unwavering dedication. And let's be honest, Brooke was not only the smartest person in the room, but also remarkably the most humble. So our paths diverged a bit after graduation, but fate or perhaps grant applications brought us back together. So when I got back into the grant scene, Brooke and we reconnected. And I have a very special memory, a truly touching one from the thick of the COVID shutdown that I just wanted to share. And I feel like it just encapsulates, our friendship and who she was to me. So I have two beautiful daughters. At the time, they were 7 and 4. So they happened to catch me on a Zoom meeting with Brooke and some of our colleagues. So naturally, they were full of questions about Brooke. And of course, I was thrilled to tell them all about Brooke and her impressive accomplishments and her kind and generous spirit. And I also did mention her connection to a certain movie with Lacey Chabert and Christopher Reeve. And they were, needless to say, extremely impressed. We did the whole Wikipedia thing, and they believe she's a movie star. So, but the real magic happened when I told Brooke about my daughter's fascination with her. And without hesitation, she graciously agreed to meet with them via Zoom. And she spoke to them about the importance of advocacy and about being a good human and about the power of never giving up on your dreams. And I can honestly say that her words resonated deeply, not just with me and my daughters, but in a way that I know will continue to inspire and influence generations to come. So that's
Thank you.
that's my connection to Brooke, and she's clearly just an amazing person. And I always say that whatever room she was in, is in, she just makes it better. And yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the Garcia point of view, Brooke used to teach the ethics classes every summer, and her point of view was the definition of holistic ethics, meaning look all around at multiple implications, sort of the butterfly in China effect. And she would raise all sorts of really challenging issues for the students to debate, such as when they came up with electric brain stimulation. She said, would you like to go to a doctor who passed his MCAT exam due to brain stimulation? And that started a whole debate in the classroom. Or she would flash up, I don't know, the people who were able to hear her 2 years ago who were with us. She would start her presentation with a picture of some criminal with a gun. And she'd say, is he bad? Yeah, he's bad. Then she would show a soldier in uniform with a gun. Is he bad? Okay. And then she would end up with showing a picture of, I think it's Breaking Bad, the TV show, or something in that genre. And it would trigger discussion. So this was in 2021, and that she first started. And at this point, the discussions went on forever. And we'd say, look, we really have to move on, and she had to go. So we asked the kids, if you are so interested, then write about it. Pick a topic, go into depth, and write about it. That is in 2021. And then in 2022, Maytak Kelst, who was from Mrs. Ruth's Freed School, Yeshiva University for Girls, got an ISSN number for this, and it turned into a peer review journal. And
Quite impressive.
It is remarkable.
we'd like to thank our referees here who are it went to, they spent a lot of time reviewing for Davida, who took over the flag of JESTI from Meital. And I'd like to pass now the floor to her, and she'll introduce the journal JESTI and tell us about it.
Hi, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today. My name is Davida, and I'm the editor-in-chief of JESTI. So we're really excited to have everyone here today after several months of peer review, organization, formatting, and whatnot. We're really excited to share our third volume with you all today, and we're incredibly proud of all of the students whose work is being published here. So we decided to dedicate the third volume of JESTI to Dr. Brooke Ellison, who was a longtime mentor to the editorial board. I worked with Dr. Ellison last year as a member of the editorial board, and her guidance was crucial to founding and publishing the initial volumes of JESTI. Not only did she guide us through the peer review process itself and getting papers to publication, but she also visited and lectured Garcia students on scientific ethics for nearly a decade. And through her deep understanding and dedication to ethics, she motivated countless students to pursue scientific and technological advancement, but also consider the moral and social implications of their work, inspiring them to research and publish their own papers in JESTI. And especially with the current pace of scientific progress, it's particularly crucial for young researchers and students to question the impact of their work on their community, as Dr. Ellison advocated. The editorial board hopes to honor and uphold Dr. Ellison's commitment to ethical education through JESTI, which provides students with a platform to engage in ethical discussion and voice their own perspectives on crucial ethical dilemmas in STEM fields. We believe it's vital for scientific and ethical education to go hand in hand in order to ensure ethical and responsible progress. And we hope to continue that same mission that Dr. Ellison began when she helped mentor JESTI through its initial volumes. We'd also like to thank Dr. Rafaelovich and Jessica Hofflich for all of their time and their dedication over the past few months. This volume would not be possible without their support and guidance, both during the summer and throughout the school year on weekends, often, at 9 p.m. or even later. And we'd also like to thank all of our peer reviewers who took the time to provide meticulous feedback on each paper, ensuring the quality of each article that we're publishing today. And then lastly, we'd also like to thank all of the students who contributed their original research to the journal this year. We're publishing 20 original articles by more than 40 student authors in this volume, which amounts to over 220 pages of research. So we're really proud of the work being published today and hope all of our authors continue pursuing research and ethics in the future. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kevin to review some of the topics that we're going to be publishing this year.
Before we
thank
do
you,
so,
Davida.
I just want to point out that we have a special guest on the call as well. We have Dr. Carl Lejwe. He is the provost and executive vice president for the university.
Yeah, great.
So-
Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. Sorry, I'm a bit later than I had hoped, but I think when you think about legacy, a lot of times we think about the ways in which someone has accomplished something. And that is certainly the case for Dr. Brooke Ellison. But when you also think about legacy, you think about the impact you've left behind and what others then take from that and go on to do. And tonight is a great example of both of those aspects of legacy. And every student here tonight, our faculty who have done so much work with the students. JESTI is just a great example of what it means when a university comes together and we have truly special people like Dr. Ellison who have set a standard that now we all can work incredibly hard to try to emulate and to try to move forward as much as we can. And as we think about what it means to be a student-run peer-reviewed journal, this is one of the greatest bits of evidence of what it means when a research university does things the right way. And so I am really honored to be here with you all tonight, to be a part of this celebration, and to have another opportunity for us to remember what Dr. Ellison has meant. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about the timing delay, but it's really great to be here with you, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Davida, floor is yours again.
Yes, so I'll hand it over to Kevin, who's going to introduce some of the topics that we're discussing in the journal this year and some of the different dilemmas which our authors explored.
Right. Thank you, Davida. This year, I'm proud to say that there was a very high emphasis on AI and machine learning. A lot of our submissions and a lot of the papers that you'll be seeing tonight have a very vital component. It's either focused with an AI, certain like an AI technology within a medical field, or there will be like a lot of considerations given to the rise of AI. And we're seeing this, especially after, the release of ChatGPT 2 years ago, that now like we're seeing AI in every single part of our lives. And it's also seeing like major applications in other fields, for example, in like we're seeing applications in the medical field with different like now we're integrating artificial intelligence into like into properly developing medicines, or seeing it in like other applications, for example, autonomous driving. And also another thing that we're seeing is that we're seeing a lot more papers. Like there's again a very high emphasis on medical related papers, for example, medical innovations and brain computer interfaces, or even 3D bioprinting artificial organs. So tonight you're going to see a very wide array of topics from every single corner of science and technology that you can possibly imagine. Thank you.
And now we'd like to introduce Elena, who was in charge of our cover art, and have her introduce our cover art for this year.
Sounds great. Would you like me to share my screen so you can see
Yes,
it?
please. Yes.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Now I'm a dinosaur when it comes to this, so bear with me. I'm terrible with technology. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen. Is that working?
Yes.
Oh, great. Hi.
Yes.
So this is our cover. It was done in Procreate, and I really wanted the colors to pop for our third volume. I'm going to be so honest, this was my first try at digital art, so I'm happy with how it turned out. But I'm really fortunate to have had this position. I'm a strong believer in the intersection of the science and the arts. It's actually what my college essay was on. I talked a lot about how the skills involved in both the visual arts and the sciences interact and involve one another. So I'm very pleased to have had this position, and I'm really excited that this is how the cover came out.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
So would you like me to go into Davida, my paper, as our first?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna do that again. Share my screen again. Okay. Let me know if that works. Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. So I worked on this paper with a partner, Hunter McGuire, and we talked about direct-to-consumer genetic testing. So our title was Pandora's Kit, Privacy, Ethics, and Accountability in an Age of Direct-to-Consumer Genetic Testing. And some of the topics we covered were the ethics, privacy, governmental oversight, and enduring controversies of companies, including Ancestry and 23andMe. So one of our sections included ethics and consumer health. So while such companies allow us to understand ourselves better and take proactive steps against disease, the test's inability to detect rare conditions, lack of information surrounding diseases, protective factors, and psychological stress associated with test results make these companies limited. So for example, the accuracy of what's called SNP chip genotyping decreases as allelic frequency declines. So detection and assessment of rare variants can be inaccurate. And this was exemplified through the detection of certain mutations in certain genes. So 23andMe specifically can only detect 3 genetic variants in the BRCA gene, which is a tumor suppressor gene, whereas there are thousands of mutations involved. So this can be a limitation, and if someone receives a negative test result, this can provide a false sense of reassurance. However, direct-to-consumer genetic testing can offer a less expensive, fast, and easy method to at-home test. Can be used for personal health info and making lifestyle improvements. So discovering disease predispositions and encouraging consumers to pursue methods of bettering their health is a positive to direct-to-consumer genetic testing. Also, contributing consumer data to databases can improve research in related fields, allowing genome-wide association studies to recognize genetic variants, gain insight into complex diseases, and obtain a more diverse range of data. So that's always a benefit for scientific research. Another one of our subjects included privacy and regulatory concerns. So consumers often trust their personal information, such as race, ethnicity, and health status, to DTC test providers. And unfortunately, this data is not always properly maintained. So the 2023 security breach leaked marginalized communities' personal information onto the dark web, which wasn't great. Terms and conditions pages are often impossible to digest. I'm sorry. Oh, never mind. Sorry. And only 57% of genetic companies actually provide details about information and protection use in their privacy policies, which are often click-wrap agreements written in high linguistic register. So that serves as a negative to these companies, and often consumers don't know what they're getting into when they sign up to do these tests. Some companies even allow the sharing of personally identifiable data with third parties and disclosure to law enforcement. So that's privacy regulation. Moving on to governmental oversight. Certain organizations such as the FDA, CLIA, and HIPAA provide regulation of information, which is a positive, but unfortunately gaps still exist. So genomic discrimination in long-term care is still possible. And there are still enduring controversies with these tests. So surreptitious testing, where genetic information is collected and analyzed against an individual's will, is definitely a topic of concern and is debated. So this is used not only by law enforcement, but also by companies, which encourage it to use or to determine paternity or infidelity. And it's not explicitly illegal in most states. So interesting. Forensic genealogy is also used. This was how the Golden State Killer was found, by tracing people who are related to a person of interest, and this raises certain ethical dilemmas. Data leaks are also a point of concern. So in conclusion, ethical dilemmas and legal discrepancies make DTC genetic testing weak and concerning, but there are, however, companies such as Ancestry and 23andMe are not healthcare providers, and so they don't share the same responsibilities and may not be able to be held up to the same ethical conversations. And so though there are concerns in time with improvements, the easiness of at-home testing could become more reliable, and it is still really interesting to see more about oneself. So yeah, that was the premise of our paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Davida, do you have a list of people who are presenting?
Yes. Sadie, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll go. Just give me a second. I need to figure out how to share my screen. I'm on my iPad. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, I'm Sadie. I was one of the editors for JESTI this year, and I wrote this paper alongside Ishita, who is also here tonight. And we wrote it on the ethical concerns regarding the continued use of BMI as a health metric. So our biggest concern is that BMI is such a widely used tool to assess health by categorizing individuals into race-based classifications. And it was originally developed for a general study, but it's now been repurposed as an individual diagnostic tool. But this tool fails to account for body composition, cultural and ethnic differences, and overall metabolic health. So we wanted to research and kind of dig deeper into why BMI does this and why this is an ethical issue. And we found out that it fails to recognize these things, and it has these differences between Western standards and Eastern standards. So BMI was developed based on Western standards. So it fails to account South Asian, African standards. So where Westerns may be more leaner or have lower bone density, some other groups may have higher muscle masses or may have higher body fat due to different ethnic regions that they come from. We also discovered that the BMI leads to misclassification and misdiagnosed health conditions like different disorders like diabetes, or classifying people as overweight, which then can lead to significant mental health issues or even medical care. So anxiety, depression, eating disorders can all stem from this negative diagnosis from the use of BMI as a tool. And it's really important that we recognize this as an ethical issue because it is such a common practice for the medical field to use this as a tool. And I think we need to start changing the way that we use this tool specifically to diagnose people with different health conditions, especially like diabetes or any weight-related diseases. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, Joseph, would you like to share your paper?
Yes, of course. So, hello everyone. I am Joseph Young, and I'm also one of the editors in the JESTI board. And this is my presentation on our research that I did with Eli and Dhruva, which they'll also be presenting with me today on like AI in the treatment and early detection of neurodegenerative diseases. So Dhruva, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so currently neurodegenerative diseases affect over 50 million Americans, and it's a prevalent issue in our society that needs to be addressed. Furthermore, AI has begun to become more prevalent in the healthcare field as it can be used for many different things such as biomarker identification, creating actual treatment groups so that way experiments are easier to carry out and things of the sort. However, when implementing AI into addressing neurodegenerative diseases, we must approach with caution, as even though it has begun to become integrated, and obviously to a certain extent it should, we must make sure that we look at the ethics of this integration and ensure we do it in an equitable and equitable manner that where everyone is able to access it while also recognizing the potential risks and taking actions to address them. So Eli, do you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
I can start. It's fine. The order isn't too bad. But yeah, so one of the biggest problems is that AI integration in healthcare disrupts the traditional patient-provider dynamic between the patient and the provider, whether that's a doctor or otherwise. And historically, trust is central to this relationship. And AI now introduces a third party. And so while AI can enhance decision making on the part of the provider, ethical considerations must be addressed, and the WHO proposes four main categories. And so the first is transparency and explainability. And what that is AI decisions must be clear and understandable, and the provider must be able to interpret and explain the outputs of the AI to patients. And then the second is patient and provider autonomy. And so AI should support, not replace human decision making. Again, going back to the patient-provider relationship. Patients must also be able to provide their informed consent. And for them to give their informed consent, providers must also be able to effectively communicate the mechanism and the output of the AI. And this is also critical for neurodegenerative patients who have declining cognitive abilities. The third category is patient safety and well-being. And so AI models need rigorous testing and validation. And because AI models are context specific to the type of disease doctors need to understand what type of model they're using and if it's good for this application. And so the fourth category and final category is responsibility and accountability. And so this is the question of who is liable for AI errors, developers, providers, hospitals. And so because AI evolves autonomously, this makes liability complex. It introduces the many hands problem, which is where AI development involves multiple different stakeholders. And so it's very difficult to actually to assign blame from a legal standpoint. And so there are regulatory gaps with current laws in terms of how to address erroneous predictions and bad results. And so another one final aspect is AI and how it's impacted at-home care, especially with neurodegenerative diseases. So there's been a big shift towards telemedicine with chatbots that patients can ask for advice like they would a doctor. And this introduces its own risks of lack of human oversight, and because it's not incorporated in a trusted institution. And so there's a risk of misinformation. And there's also the application of AI for data analytics with wearables. So that could be to monitor blood pressure, heart rate, also to analyze footage in severe circumstances and where patients are being observed. And again, this raises ethical concerns that Dhruva is going to talk about soon about privacy, continuous data collection, and who controls and uses this data.
So I'll go next, and this time we also analyze different social and economic factors, and overall through economic predictive models, the use of AI in healthcare could potentially save up to $260 billion for the U.S. healthcare industry in the next 10 years. And this is due to increased efficiency, improved resource allocation for administrative and also patient care processes. However, this also contributes to like an overall economic outcome, but it also causes issues such as like intervention generation inequality. And this is due to the targeted approach of money healthcare companies, and efficiencies could overall be improved for affluent communities, but individuals in lower socioeconomic brackets could not gain these benefits due to many different barriers. And one of the main barriers that we have is health literacy. And AI technologies are deployed, and disparities between health literacy can inhibit effective communication about AI-driven diagnosis and treatment options, potentially leaving neurodegenerative disease of patients vulnerable to misunderstandings or the misuse of health information. And this lack of engagement with the AI tools can create a feedback loop where the individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds receive less benefit from AI interactions and reinforcing health disparities within society. And overall, healthcare providers and AI developers need to prioritize user-friendly interfaces and also work on community outreach to increase digital literacy to back up the overall increase and improvement for our economic models.
So next up, I'll talk a little bit about privacy. And one of the main issues, main ethical issues with privacy is with biomarker analysis and patient identification. So these are the main fields where AI is currently used in neurodegenerative disease in basically creating treatment groups for stuff such as Alzheimer's and things, since that's one of the main, most difficult processes of creating an experiment would be to ensure that these treatment groups are comparable. And the way that AI is able to do this is by looking at biomarkers of patients and thus splitting them into treatment groups that are actually comparable to a sense. However, the issue with this is that these biomarkers can be extremely vital to sort of like if this data were to be spread in a manner, then it can be potentially harmful to the patient itself and the people that are participating in these trials. As with this case, if this data was to spread, then it may actually affect their life in sort of like the workforce and other aspects as well. For example, a study found that patients with multiple sclerosis, if this diagnosis was given, it's a lot harder for them to be able to find jobs and things of the sort. Furthermore, there's also the issue of privacy breaches, as currently the data systems that are used for AI can often be infiltrated by hackers and things of the sort. And not only can they extract data about what patients' information is being implemented into here, they can also inject data. And in this case, this can also lead to failability of the AI model, which can also lead to misdiagnoses or other issues when trying to run these trials. And furthermore, and a way to address this would be through implementing differential privacy systems, which can basically help ensure that these hackers can't also reverse engineer the actual patient's data through the AI model, since that's also a current issue with in the healthcare field is that when these hackers are able to obtain this information or even just use the model in general, they'd be able to create specific patient information through reverse engineering it. And then there's also the issue of information biases, where basically the AI model can often is often fallible, and it may provide misdiagnosis, or it may split the treatment groups unevenly in a certain manner. And when it does this, it can also lead to harm in the actual treatment for patients later on in the future, which is a major problem. And that's something that needs to be addressed by ensuring that when we are to implement AI, we still guide it with professionals until we're certain that it can be used effectively and efficiently. And this is extremely important. The entire balance of privacy in AI is a balance between between training the model on higher levels of data and ensuring patient security with their own data. And that's why it's really important that as we advance privacy, we ensure that we're doing it in a sustainable manner. And then finally, for the bibliometric analysis, as we can see here, the main two most studied fields are Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And it shows the disparity of the implementation of AI into various neurodegenerative diseases. And with this bibliometric analysis, it's clear that we also need to further do more studies and essentially cite more information about other neurodegenerative diseases to ensure that there's equitable access to AI when people are seeking healthcare. And this is the only way that we can actually implement it in a sustainable manner where it's equitable for everyone. And to do so, we must ensure that when we implement AI, everyone can use it and it's addressing all issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick comment before I give it back to Davida. These students know all about AI very well because Davida and the authors of this paper are right now in the process of writing their own paper and have given now multiple talks at conferences on an AI program for spin casting thin films that are critical in the semiconductor industry. So they're quite experienced in AI in every respect. Thank you. I had to say that, Vita.
Yes, I mean, next we're going to hear from Kevin, whose paper is also about AI, I believe. So continuing the same theme, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Give me a second to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so I'm Kevin Jung. I'm from Northampton High School, and today I'll be discussing the technology and the ethics of machine learning-based dynamic pricing. So dynamic pricing, let's start off, is a real-time pricing strategy that adjusts based on various conditions, like for example, the demand-supply imbalances in the market. You could also have other market conditions, like for example, like a random event that happens and then the prices will change based on that, or it can be even as random as the weather. And this increases total revenues for suppliers or the sellers through price discrimination. As you can see in the right diagram, that if it's static pricing, aka you set one price only, you will only be able to get so much revenue. But setting multiple prices at multiple different price points, then all of a sudden you can get higher revenues by segregating your markets efficiently. And the first modern day implementation, we saw this with airlines back with airline ticket clerks who would just price tickets actually on the fly in the morning of, like, if you went to the airport, you would buy a ticket and they would give you a price. And that changed based on how they effectively did an arbitrary form of price discrimination. And this is one of the first recorded instances of dynamic pricing in the modern day era. And so today with there is increasing consideration and adoption with digital shopping and all the AI-powered algorithms that we now have to effectively create the technology needed for dynamic pricing. And so there are 4 major factors that affect dynamic pricing. Place being, well, your location. Like for example, in a city, as you can see here, that different places, the prices for maybe like the same product or the same ride are very much different. You can if you can also compare this to like a restaurant in like the middle of Times Square to like a restaurant in effectively the middle of nowhere. obviously there's going to be a price discrepancy, even though the products are very much the same. Time being in, for example, late night times, it's going to be, you're right, it's probably going to be more expensive because there are less drivers. The product being that there are different ways to discriminate products through like a little bit of differentiation, but essentially the core idea, the core product is still the same. It's just adding this feature here or taking away another feature, and then the prices change drastically. And finally, demographics, and this is probably the most controversial out of the 4 factors, is that sometimes they will look at demographics, for example, race, gender, ethnicity, your age group, and they will make prices according to that. An example would be the senior discounts being a form of the dynamic pricing parts that could effectively influence prices. Now, obviously, with dynamic pricing, you're going to run into major issues. For example, price gouging, because if, like, for example, that during a time of crisis, there will be very low supply, and dynamic pricing algorithms are just trained to see low supply and just jack up prices. So obviously, in these times of critical need, when everyone needs like this certain product, then all of a sudden it just spirals out of control. Discrimination, obviously, because unfortunately, these models may just end up discriminating against certain marginalized groups. And finally, there are data privacy violations, as these algorithms require large quantities of data in order to be effectively trained and do better. And that means, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of times in which these data collection companies or the selling companies themselves will encroach on like what we consider as private data because again, this is a gray zone. There are not many laws on the data and privacy parts, so there could be a lot of violations in this aspect that consumers would be effectively unaware of. And so I bring to you 2 case studies of one successful and one very much unsuccessful implementations of dynamic pricing. So the first one, we're going to look at the unsuccessful one, and this is Wendy's. If you remember last year, Wendy's essentially began rolling out their dynamic pricing. In one of the earning calls, their CEO mentioned that we're going to be implementing dynamic pricing with our new digital screens. And on that same earning call, he did not mention anything about how the dynamic pricing, like how the dynamic pricing model would be implemented, who would be affected, how does the thing actually work, like what are the factors involved. And so obviously with all the media and investors listening to this, this quickly got out, and many people were very unhappy about it because, to be honest, who would want to find out that they're going to Wendy's and their burger now costs double because it's rush hour? So there was a major social media uproar, and many people boycotted Wendy's, and there was so much backlash that Wendy's had to abandon it very quickly on. They're only able to implement it for like in a few restaurants and for maybe like a month or two before it was so bad that they just had to pull it back. Meanwhile, Uber has already been doing dynamic pricing for many, many years. They began in, I believe, 2017, 2018, where they found in Boston that essentially if they implemented a dynamic pricing model during like the late night weekend times at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. when there were not many drivers and a lot of people were finishing up going to the bar. So high demand, low supply. And so that's when the first implementation of dynamic pricing occurred. They are one of the first adopters of dynamic pricing as a major company. And they also have a very fully digital platform. So it's very easy for them to change the prices in real time based on the existing data. Additionally, the peak demand usually happens in like these special circumstances, as I mentioned in Boston. It happened at like 3 a.m. because that's when everyone was coming out from the bars, or during inclement weather because, for example, it's raining or it's snowing, not many people want to take public transportation or walk. And finally, Uber is very transparent about when they implement dynamic pricing, that in many situations, they will give a warning before you effectively place down an order or even go through the ordering process for an Uber, that they will tell you that dynamic pricing is active and do acknowledge this. And so users see all this transparency. You could search up their different, I guess, their modeling, how they implement dynamic pricing. And so users are much more adjusted to dynamic pricing, and there's very little backlash compared to Wendy's. And so moving forward, we need to do consider that these firms with more monopolistic powers will use DP to artificially inflate prices, and this will come at a cost for marginalized groups, especially. They will be facing the blunt of these cost rises. And dynamic pricing requires a large amount of data, and that means companies will find ways to get that data. And that means, yes, there will be major consumer privacy violations. And this is where the government comes in that they should be able to create regulatory agencies to prevent exploitation from dynamic pricing as itself, like an algorithm. For example, like big companies required to release their methodology in creating their algorithms, or also implement stricter consumer privacy laws to prevent the exploitation for data to build these models. And I think most importantly for companies, that they should have very clear communications about how, what, why, when, and how their dynamic pricing models are being implemented for obviously, one, a lack to prevent backlash, and two, for the ethical reasons that there should not be much exploitation. I'm Kevin Jung, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And
Thank
we'll
you,
keep that in
Kevin.
mind next time we have the Mr. Softy truck come to the campus.
The ice cream sundaes were very good.
Yes, and he kept the price down.
Oh, yes.
And lastly, we have Damien, who's going to share a little more about his paper.
Hi, I'm sorry, I didn't prep much because I didn't expect to be able to speak. But can you guys see my screen? Is it good? It's like not letting me open it.
Looks good.
Open. Wait, I gotta open it and then reshare.
Damien, you're a marvel of modern dentistry.
Thanks. I'm trying to figure out how'd you guys do this? You want me oh,
Just share.
now it's good. There you go. Sorry. Okay, let me close it. No. Okay. So this was I wrote two papers. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I said I'm in an editor for JESTI. Okay, so this was the first paper I wrote about ethics in aquaculture with Ella Park, who couldn't be here because she lives in South Korea. But we worked on this one together. And basically, with the growing human population, of course, we need more food. And as fish, of course, in the ocean just become overfished and overfished at higher and higher rates, there's been a big shift to aquaculture or fish farming. And this paper really looked at open net salmon aquaculture because I believe it's the most popular. And really, what we're finding, what we found at least through everything we searched through, was that while it can be good, of course, for sustaining and feeding the growing population, this open net fish farming, because there's just a release of waste and ammonia and leftover food and all these materials, and also their construction itself and the fish's close contact with each other, we found that there's been a large upsurge in like of course water pollution, eutrophication, medical ailments amongst fish. And also interestingly, we looked through one article where we found that fish actually have been shown to have sentience, and they can almost like at least somewhat like sense like their captivity and then of course like their farming, which was pretty interesting to see. Um but yeah, and then there's also impacts on like the coast if you're living on a coast, and then off right there on the coast there's fish farming. This can also impact your water quality and erosion of your coastline, which is very interesting. So to keep it short, because I didn't really prep anything, there are reforms such as we mentioned here, recirculating aquaculture systems, which have been found to decrease this waste spread. While they don't really address the erosion aspect, the water pollution aspect is arguably the most important, and of course also the medical, with keeping the fish healthy and recirculating that water. And so we believe that, of course, all institutions for fish farming should switch to these more sustainable and healthy systems. But some might not because it's less cost effective, but it's important. Um, all right, I'm moving on to my second paper. I was looking at the ethical considerations in, I call it, well, it's called armored shoreline development, but really just think about concrete structures or rock structures or wood structures on the coastline that are there to prevent erosion. That's what armored shoreline development is. And basically, like, if you've ever seen, it's called a groin. It's those either walls or poles that jet out from the coastline into the water a little bit. See, what something like that does is it prevents the longshore migration of sediment. And while to prevent, because longshore migration is kind of synonymous with erosion. And so in these coasts where there's higher sea action and wave action because of global warming, which I should have said, they do put these structures to prevent the migration of the sediment. And while this can be good for immediate protection of coastal lands and coastal infrastructure and seaside houses, in the long run, this does actually promote further erosion because eventually all the sediment will build up on that one side or build up towards the land, I guess, landward, sorry, until there's like a imbalance of sediment in like those groined off regions, if you can picture what I'm saying. And so basically what I argue for in this paper, what I discuss is a transition to what's known as soft or more natural coastal engineering, such as beach nourishment, where what they do is they measure the distribution of like sediment sizes on an eroding coast at different points along the coast, and then they will try to match this sediment distribution, and they'll dredge sediment somewhere else, match the sediment distribution, and then disperse this sediment along the coast for it to be naturally redistributed in its natural balance. And so that can promote sustainability. It can promote, protecting ecosystems while also providing the anti-erosion effect that the structures would. And of course, these sometimes just take more time, but over time they have become more and more favored by federal agencies and researchers and engineers. And so that's my main point of this paper. So I didn't prepare anything, but those are my two papers.
Thank you very much. We know Damien just had wisdom teeth removed.
Yes, this morning.
But the work that you're talking about, I guess, is also relevant to the research that you've been doing with the Army Corps of
Yes, I
Engineers.
did. I had the connection with the erosion.
Yes, where they're using bio-based polymer to substitute for concrete. Thank you. Yes, Davida, ready?
Yes, so that concludes all of our papers, our presentations for today. So thank you all for joining us here today. I hope you learned a little more about some of the papers which we were going to be publishing today for online on our website. And you can go to read more about them and read the full papers online on our website for JESTI. And thank you so much for joining us.
And
Dr.
now
Furlich?
JESTI goes live, correct? At this moment. Jessica, you can press the button. Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
Very nice. And it's good to see everyone again.
Congratulations.
This is really awesome.
Thank you so much.
Great job. Thank
Listen.
you so much, everyone.
Fantastic.
Brooke would be very overjoyed at this presentation tonight.
You are all immensely cool.
It was her legacy to teach students to think in every dimension about where they are.
I'm very proud of all of you, knowing that you're carrying her work forward and that you're going to be ethical scientists in the future.
And that you are that next generation of ethical scientists.
Yes.
Set the bar very, very high. And each and every one of you, incredible, really beautiful work.
We need you
Thank you all
now
so
more
much.
than ever.
That's for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
And a special thank you to all of our reviewers, some of whom joined us today, because we wouldn't have been able to get the final volume published if it wasn't for all of the feedback that we received and were able to deliver to the authors. So thank you to everybody. This was very much a group effort, and we're very proud of having made it to the finish line after multiple months.
Yes, it was very impressive. The whole journal intact was very impressive when I saw it today.
Thank you. And I should say just quickly, because we have a couple of other people here who joined us who had also contributed. They were not part of the editorial staff, but they contributed papers. And if you can tell us, like in 2 minutes, 2 sentences. Silas, what did you contribute? And David?
Hi, I worked with my friends Benjamin and Daniel, and we wrote about the ethics of conflict mineral mining.
And what's the issue?
Conflict mineral mining. So there's a lot of metals that are mined like immorally in a large section of Africa, and so we wrote about highlighting them.
Thank you. And David?
Hi, my name is David Sun. I wrote a paper on the ethics of mandates on antibiotic stewardship programs with my friend Dylan Wong, who wasn't able to be here tonight. But essentially, we're covering on combating antibiotic resistance, which is a huge problem when antibiotics are often used to treat viruses and bacteria, and implementing these antibiotic stewardship programs to prevent these mutations. However, based on the resources that certain countries or nations have, it might be difficult to implement some of these programs. So we examine the disparity in this implementation.
Anybody else that submitted? Okay.
I can go. So my paper, I worked with Shreya, who's not here today. Our paper was on the ethics of ocean acidification reduction methods. So basically, all the techniques that engineers are developing to reduce ocean acidification and how they can make those techniques economical, equitable, and ethically informed. So we discussed this using 3 pillars, which were environmental damage, impact on marginalized communities, and economic cost of the solutions.
Thank you. Now, Arohi's in India, so she has to go to school in 2 hours, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. It was good to see you. And good night to people in the New York area.
And a special thank you to Miriam and Jess for running this wonderful program, for continuing to do it all these years.
Great job.
Thank you again. Pleasure. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.